So on that note, I'm going to invite you to join me in a little song if you remember this from childhood, because the choir's not singing, so I figured we could all be choir just for this little ditty. So if you know it, I'm going to attempt to sing it unaccompanied. We'll see how we do. Jesus bids us shine, just the refrain of that one. Okay. Jesus bids us shine with a pure, clear light, like a little candle burning in the night. In this world of darkness, so we must shine. You in your small corner, and I in mine. Okay, good job. Clearly that one struck a chord. We used to use that song in the Whole People of God curriculum back many, many, many years ago. And then one time at one of our events, someone who was African said, that's not a great song. And of course, we all thought, gee, we've been singing this since we were kids. What's wrong with it? And he said, well, it comes from a period when the sense of that song was, don't rock the boat. Don't do any serious big stuff for justice. Just you stay over there in your corner and I'll stay over here in mine. And many of us who have felt excluded have had problems with that song because of that sense. And so we chose not to include it any longer in the curriculum. And then sometime after that, I couldn't tell you exactly when, I was doing a workshop at a church in the southern United States. It was a predominantly black church. And they happened to be singing that song. I thought, okay, this is weird. So I said to them, well, we used to include that song in the curriculum, and we were told that it was, by someone who was a person of color, that they found it a racist song. And the response I was given was, oh no, the song is a very, very important part of our history. It reminded us that even when we can't speak out loudly for justice, we can still do something. You do something in your corner, I do something in mine. We shine that light, however small, and eventually it will change the world. So isn't that interesting? Two completely different views of that old chorus, and I am not about to make a determination as to which one was correct, because I doubt that we'd ever know, but clearly understood very differently from different angles. Several years ago, when the U.S. was deciding to invade Afghanistan, I recalled this news story of some soldiers who were members of the U.S. military. I mean, they'd signed up, they'd done the boot camp thing, the whole bit. And they wanted to be declared conscientious objectors and not go off to war. And that just sounded weird to me. Now, I'm very proud that I am a conscientious objector, and when I took out citizenship in the United States, I had been granted permission. I had registered, and they checked me out and interviewed me, and they said, yes, you can be a conscientious objector. And so when I was taking the oath of citizenship, I proudly sat down for the portion that said I will take up arms, and then I stood back up for the rest of it. So there's a part of me that was really intrigued that these people wanted to be conscientious objectors and not go off to war, except I thought, hold on. You guys joined the military. I'm assuming you weren't drunk when you joined. I'm assuming you knew what you were doing. Joining the military means that you go to war, right? I mean, that's their job. So I thought, come on, guys, if you're going to sign up for the military, you got to go to war. And then I heard a couple of them being interviewed on the radio, and they said, well, we signed up for the military because we believe in defending our country. And if anyone ever attacks us here or abroad, we will go to war to defend our nation, and we will fight to the death. But we never signed up to go and invade some foreign country for no reason. And that's why we're objecting. Again, completely different ways of looking at things. So then we have this morning's gospel reading from Luke about Zacchaeus. Nice, good, easy, tame story. Nicely rounded up, starts, middle, ending. Great story. We have Zacchaeus. Short man. Everybody loves this story because poor Zacchaeus is short. I'm not that short, but well, Ralph is shaking his head. Ralph is shortness challenged. I've run into people who say they're height challenged. Some of us are shortness challenged. Anyway, often we relate to Zacchaeus, especially children do, because Zacchaeus is little, so he's like them. And he's a chief tax collector. Now, we don't know what that is because this is the only time that word ever gets used, interestingly. But, you can kind of do the math and figure out a chief tax collector for the area probably is in charge of a bunch of other tax collectors, right? Kind of makes sense. And we do know that the Roman taxation system in those days was very unfair. Very unfair because tax collectors, first of all, were paid by commission. Just think about that one. The more tax you collected, the more money you made. Probably not a good way to run the system. And furthermore, the higher up you were on the scale, the more money you got, because everyone below had to pay commissions up the scale. The old pyramid style of marketing. So if Zacchaeus is a chief tax collector, we can, I think, fairly safely assume he's somewhere up the notches of the pyramid, and thus he's doing quite well. He's participating in a very corrupt system, and he's getting a lot of money out of it. So short guy, corrupt tax collector, wants to see Jesus when Jesus is coming to town. Now that's an odd one in this story if you think about it. This guy, if he's heard stories about Jesus, he probably knows Jesus is talking about things that would not be terrifically favorable to a corrupt tax collector. So you got to wonder briefly, why is he going to see Jesus? Maybe he wants to toss a few rocks or, rotten mangoes or something out of the tree. I don't know. But he goes to see Jesus. He climbs up the tree because he's short and he can't see over the crowd. And he's up in his tree and he's watching. And of course, everyone is excited. Jesus is coming into Jericho and people are cheering and throwing things and they're running out to talk to Jesus and stuff. And it's this great parade. And Jesus is marching along and he comes and he stops right under Zacchaeus' tree. Isn't that interesting? All the places he could have stopped, he stops right there and he looks up and he sees Zacchaeus in the tree. And he says, "Come on down. I'm coming to your house." If you remember the little song from childhood and you learned it the way I did, "I'm coming to your house for tea." I've later heard it as "I'm coming to your house today." But anyway, invites Zacchaeus down, says, "I want to come to your place." And then a few other things happen and the people all grumble and complain and Zacchaeus says, "Oh, I'm now a changed man and I'm going to pay everybody back for all the bad things I've done." And Jesus says, "Salvation has come to your household and everything's fine and wonderful and this bad person becomes good and we all go home and feel really lovely and let's sing a hymn now." Except that's not what the story says. That's what tradition says about that story. And in fact, you'll find good English translations that will translate it that way. That Zacchaeus comes down and he promises that from that day forward he'll do all these wonderful things. But that's not what the story says. It's really interesting. We want to see it that way because it's really good to read a story about a bad person becoming good. And when it's about somebody else, it's not about me, right? I want to read a story about someone else being bad because I don't want to read a story where I might be bad. Zacchaeus comes down the tree and everybody complains, says, "Can't believe Jesus wants to go home with that so-and-so." And Zacchaeus says to Jesus, "Hey, I'm not so bad. I give away half of my wealth." See, in the Greek it's in the present tense. He's saying, I do this now. The law said 10% of your wealth, and some really wealthy, really generous people would give 20%. This guy gives 50% of his wealth. Where is Zacchaeus when we're doing our stewardship campaign? Just saying. He gives half of what he earns to the poor. That is amazing. And then as if that isn't enough, he says, and by the way, whenever I cheat somebody, whenever I'm doing my books and I discover I've made a mistake and I've overcharged you, I pay you back not once, not twice, not 3 times. I pay you back 4 times what I've taken. That's my incentive to make sure that I'm fair. that I'm doing this justly. In other words, what Zacchaeus points out to Jesus in that little bit of conversation is, I'm not the bad guy that everybody thinks I am. And Jesus' response is curious. If Zacchaeus is not a bad guy being changed, saved, but is a good guy, we have to wonder, so what's Jesus saying? And who's he talking to? And then, unfortunately, it becomes really obvious. Jesus is talking to the crowd. Jesus says, salvation is in this household. This person is a child of Abraham. In other words, this guy is not so bad. It's Jesus' way of saying to the crowd, he's not the bad guy. You are. Jesus is talking to the crowd here. He's not telling Zacchaeus that he's been saved nearly so much as he's saying to the crowd, hold on, don't judge quite so quickly. I don't know about you, but I would like to think that life goes an awful lot smoother when I can judge people just like that. You know, get it over with. Take one quick look. You like the outfit, they're nice. You don't like the outfit, something wrong with them. It's easy. Okay, I don't do that. If you've ever seen the way I dress, you'd know I never judge people on how they dress, I promise. Scout's honor. We tend to lapse into judgmentalism, into making decisions quickly because it's easier. We can move on with life. And Jesus says to us via the crowd in this amazing story, hold on. Don't be so quick to judge. Don't be so quick to assume who someone is, what they do, how they do it. Because maybe there's more to that story. I've read commentaries where scholars have taken great pains to point out that yes, they've studied Greek and they know that these verbs are in the present tense, but Zacchaeus must still somehow be bad. One of them I just loved because it basically said, because he just has to be, okay? I'm reading it, I'm going, you're a scholar, you've got a PhD, and the best you can come up with is he's got to be a bad guy because he's just got to be a bad guy. Wow, and they're paying you for this. It's really hard to admit that maybe we're wrong. It's really hard to admit that maybe we need to re-examine our thoughts, our preconceived notions, our judgments, our perceptions. And this story is a wonderful, wonderful story to remind us that we just got to do that sometimes. Jesus is saying to us, I believe in this story, don't be so quick to make up your mind. Even when you think you've got all the evidence, there's always a little bit more. I remember Odetta once, the folk singer, at a concert. If you've ever seen Odetta in concert, she talks an awful lot and sings just a tiny bit. But she's a brilliant talker. I went to this concert, I noticed in the first hour she sang 2 songs. The rest of the time she talked, but she's just brilliant and she was hilarious. And she was talking about prejudice. Because she was talking about going to Australia as an African-American woman, and people just looked at her really kind of strangely, and people often were prejudiced against her. And she said, you know what prejudice is? I love this definition. She said, prejudice is when you go up to somebody and you say, hold on, don't tell me nothing about you, because I know all I want to know about you. Don't tell me nothing about you, I know all that I want to know. In other words, I've got my mind made up. Please do not confuse me with the facts. And Jesus says to us, don't do that. Just don't do that. Be better than that. Know that there's always more to every story, even when you like the conclusion that you've got. Be open to wonder. And when you are, amazing things can happen for you and for others. Amen.